The perfect day interrupted. Melanie James woke up with the kind of joy that bubbled up from deep within, radiating through every fiber of her being. The sun peeked through the sheer curtains of their spacious bedroom, casting golden streaks on the soft cream-colored walls. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the diffuser Jonathan had set up the night before. He always believed in ending the day with peace. Today was special. 10 years of love, trials, triumphs, and relentless support were worth celebrating. Melanie turned to her side, her rich brown curls spilling onto her pillow. Jonathan, her rock and confidant, was still fast asleep. His strong features, softened by the gentleness of sleep, made her heart swell with gratitude. He always joked that he did all the heavy lifting in their marriage, but she knew better. Jonathan carried the weight of the world with his work as a civil rights attorney. "Happy anniversary, my love," she whispered, brushing her lips gently against his cheek. Jonathan stirred slightly, mumbling something incoherent, and Melanie stifled a laugh. Still the same after all these years, she thought with amusement. Quietly slipping out of bed, she made her way to the kitchen. The polished hardwood floors creaked beneath her steps as she brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The rich, earthy aroma filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of vanilla from the candle she had forgotten to blow out the night before. As she sipped from her favorite ceramic mug, her mind buzzed with plans for the day. Tonight was reserved for a private dinner at their favorite restaurant. But first, Melanie had a mission. She wanted to find the perfect anniversary gift for Jonathan. Something meaningful, just like the love they shared. The engraved watch she had her eyes on seemed perfect. But this wasn't just about a material gift. It was about celebrating how far they had come together. Melanie's journey hadn't been an easy one. Born and raised in a small southern town, she had faced countless challenges as a black woman trying to make her mark in the wellness industry. People had doubted her, dismissed her ideas, and even tried to undermine her success. But she had never wavered. With hard work and determination, she had built her brand from the ground up, transforming it into a national sensation. Jonathan had been her unwavering support system through it all, encouraging her to dream bigger and never settle for less. Now, 10 years into their marriage, they were stronger than ever. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her phone. A message from her assistant flashed across the screen. Meeting confirmed at 11:30 a.m. with the investors. Melanie sighed. Her schedule was packed, but she decided to take a long lunch break to pick up the watch. Balancing work and personal life was never easy, but she was determined to make time for what truly mattered. Dressed in a tailored burgundy pantsuit that accentuated her confident stride, Melanie looked every bit the successful entrepreneur she had become. As she glanced at herself in the mirror, she smiled faintly. Behind the polished exterior was a woman who had fought for every inch of her success. Before leaving the house, Melanie wrote a quick note for Jonathan. "Can't wait to celebrate with you tonight. Love, M." She placed the note on his nightstand and headed out, her heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement as she made her way to her car. Downtown was bustling with energy as Melanie navigated the morning traffic. The city had always been a place of endless opportunity and challenges, a mirror to her own journey. She parked near the boutique, grateful for a rare open spot. As she entered the boutique, the cool air and elegant displays greeted her. The store was filled with soft jazz music, and the scent of polished leather lingered in the air. "Good morning, Ms. James," the store clerk greeted warmly. "Good morning, Erica. I'm here for a special piece," Melanie said with a smile. "Anniversary, right?" Erica beamed. "We've got just the thing for you." Erica led Melanie to a glass display case filled with luxury watches. Melanie's eyes immediately landed on a sleek silver timepiece with intricate detailing. "This one comes with custom engraving," Erica offered. "Perfect," Melanie said. "Can you engrave through every storm together?" Erica nodded. "Absolutely. It'll take about 20 minutes." As Erica disappeared to prepare the engraving, Melanie wandered through the store, admiring the craftsmanship of the pieces on display. Her mind drifted back to their first anniversary, when Jonathan had surprised her with a weekend getaway to the mountains. Lost in her thoughts, Melanie didn't notice the sudden shift in the atmosphere until it was too late. The sound of screeching tires and sirens filled the air outside. The boutique's glass doors burst open as two uniformed police officers stormed in, their expressions grim and focused. Melanie's heart skipped a beat. The other patrons froze, eyes wide with confusion. The taller officer scanned the room before locking eyes on Melanie. "Ma'am, step forward," he commanded. Melanie frowned, glancing around. "Is there a problem?" "You fit the description of a robbery suspect," the officer said coldly. Her breath caught in her throat. "Excuse me? That's ridiculous. I've been here the entire time." "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," the second officer said, already reaching for his handcuffs. Panic surged through Melanie's veins. "Wait, this is a mistake. I haven't done anything wrong." Despite her protests, the officers moved swiftly. Erica, the store clerk, rushed forward. "She's telling the truth. She's been here the whole time." But the officers ignored Erica's pleas. Melanie's heart pounded as cold steel clamped around her wrists. The weight of humiliation pressed down on her as onlookers whispered and recorded the scene on their phones. "This is absurd," Melanie said, her voice trembling. "I want to speak to my attorney." The officer sneered. "You can do that down at the station." As they led her out of the boutique, the city's vibrant energy faded into a blur. Melanie's mind raced with questions. How had this happened? And how was she going to prove her innocence? One thing was certain. Jonathan was going to hear about this. And when he did, all hell was bound to break loose. Wrong place, wrong accusation. The ride to the police precinct was surreal. Melanie sat stiffly in the back seat of the squad car, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into her wrists. Her heart pounded relentlessly against her ribcage as she tried to process what had just happened. The vibrant city streets blurred past her window, but she barely noticed. Her mind was consumed with a mix of fear, confusion, and indignation. The officer in the passenger seat, a stocky man with a shaved head, glanced back at her through the grill. His eyes were hard and devoid of sympathy. "You got anything to say?" he asked gruffly. Melanie lifted her chin, fighting to keep her composure. "Yeah, I do. This is a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong." "Sure," he muttered skeptically. "That's what they all say." Melanie's jaw clenched. She wasn't about to let these officers intimidate her. She was innocent, and she would prove it. Still, the injustice of the situation gnawed at her. How many others had been swept up like this, without cause or evidence, simply because they fit the description? As they pulled into the precinct's lot, Melanie's stomach churned. The car came to a jarring stop, and the officer opened the door. "Out," he ordered. Melanie stepped out as gracefully as she could, despite the awkwardness of the cuffs. The officer grabbed her arm, his grip unnecessarily firm, and led her inside. The fluorescent lights of the precinct cast a harsh glare over everything, making the space feel sterile and unwelcoming. A few officers glanced up as Melanie was escorted through the station. Some recognized her, the polished, successful entrepreneur who had been featured in countless business magazines. Their eyes flickered with disbelief, but none said a word. The officer led her to a small, windowless interrogation room with drab gray walls and a single metal table bolted to the floor. He unceremoniously pushed her into a chair before removing the cuffs. "Wait here," he said curtly, leaving the room without another word. Melanie rubbed her sore wrists, her mind racing. The cold, clinical atmosphere of the room only heightened her anxiety. She had read stories about wrongful arrests and police misconduct, but she never imagined she'd find herself in such a situation. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Melanie's patience wore thin. She wasn't one to sit idly by, especially when her reputation and freedom were on the line. The door finally creaked open, and a tall detective with salt and pepper hair entered. He carried a folder in one hand and wore a weary expression. "Ms. James," he began, sitting across from her, "I'm Detective Harris. We brought you in because you matched the description of a robbery suspect involved in an incident earlier today." Melanie's brows furrowed. "A robbery? Are you serious? I've been at the boutique the whole time. There are witnesses who can confirm that." Harris opened the folder, revealing a grainy surveillance photo. The suspect was a black woman with curly hair, wearing a burgundy outfit, similar to Melanie's attire. Melanie scoffed. "That's your evidence, a blurry picture of someone who vaguely looks like me." Harris rubbed his temples. "I understand your frustration, but we have to follow leads. You do fit the description." Melanie leaned forward, her voice steady despite the fire simmering beneath the surface. "Do you know who I am? I'm a law-abiding citizen and a business owner. I have no criminal record. Check the boutique's security footage. It will prove I was there the entire time." Harris hesitated. "We'll look into it." "You'd better," Melanie said sharply. "Because if you don't, my husband will." Harris's brow furrowed. "And who's your husband?" "Jonathan James," Melanie said, her voice cold. Harris's eyes widened slightly. Jonathan James was a powerhouse in the legal world, known for taking on high-profile civil rights cases and winning. If Jonathan got wind of this situation, the precinct would have a public relations nightmare on their hands. "I see," Harris murmured. "We'll expedite the investigation." "You'd better," Melanie said, crossing her arms. Meanwhile, back at Jonathan's office, he was reviewing case notes when his phone buzzed. It was Melanie's assistant, Lisa, calling. "Mr. James, you need to get to the precinct," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "Melanie's been arrested." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. "What? Arrested for what?" "They're accusing her of robbery, but it's a mistake. She was at the boutique, shopping for your anniversary gift." Jonathan's grip tightened around his phone. "I'm on my way." Grabbing his briefcase, he stormed out of his office, his mind racing. How dare they? His wife, an accomplished, respected woman, wrongly accused and humiliated. The drive to the precinct was a blur. Jonathan's jaw was clenched so tightly it ached. He knew the system all too well. This wasn't just a simple mistake. It was likely another case of racial profiling. When he arrived at the station, he strode inside with an air of authority that turned heads. His tailored suit and commanding presence left no doubt that he meant business. "I'm here for my wife, Melanie James," he announced to the desk officer. The officer blinked, clearly recognizing him. One moment, Mr. James." Moments later, Detective Harris emerged, looking tense. "Mr. James, I was just about to release your wife. There's been a misunderstanding." Jonathan's eyes were cold. "A misunderstanding? You arrested an innocent woman without probable cause. That's not a misunderstanding. That's incompetence." Harris cleared his throat. "We're reviewing the footage, and it looks like she was indeed at the boutique during the robbery. We'll release her immediately." Jonathan's voice was sharp. "Good. But this isn't over." Minutes later, Melanie was escorted out of the interrogation room. When she saw Jonathan, relief washed over her. He pulled her into a protective embrace. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm fine now," she whispered. Jonathan turned to Harris. "You'll be hearing from me. And trust me, I don't lose." As they walked out of the precinct together, Melanie felt a renewed sense of strength. This wasn't just about her. It was about standing up against a broken system. And with Jonathan by her side, she knew they would fight for justice and win. Sparks of justice. As Jonathan and Melanie walked out of the precinct, a storm brewed in the air, the darkening sky a fitting reflection of their simmering emotions. Melanie's wrists still ached from the handcuffs, and the weight of humiliation lingered like a heavy fog. But Jonathan's firm grip on her hand steadied her. His presence was a shield against the injustice they had just faced. The city streets buzzed around them, indifferent to the turmoil in Melanie's heart. She drew a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Jonathan, we can't let this slide," she said, her voice resolute. "It's not just about me. How many other women, how many black women, get dragged through this system without anyone to speak for them?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "We won't let it slide, Melanie. Trust me, this fight is just beginning." They reached Jonathan's sleek black sedan, and he opened the passenger door for her. As she settled into the seat, Melanie felt a spark reignite within her, a blend of anger and determination. As they drove away from the precinct, the city blurred past them. Jonathan's fingers drummed against the steering wheel, his mind clearly racing. "I need every detail," he finally said, his voice measured. "From the moment you walked into that boutique to the second they put those cuffs on you." Melanie recounted the ordeal, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. Jonathan listened intently, his sharp legal mind already piecing together a strategy. "They didn't even question the store clerk?" he asked incredulously. "No." Erica tried to speak up, but they ignored her, Melanie said bitterly. Jonathan's eyes flickered with rage. "Text me her contact information. I'll need her statement." Melanie nodded. "What's our first move?" "We're going to make them regret this," Jonathan said grimly. "I'll file a formal complaint with Internal Affairs and demand a full investigation into the arrest." But that's just the beginning. Back at their home, the atmosphere was somber but charged with purpose. Jonathan's legal files were spread across the dining table, alongside Melanie's notes detailing her ordeal. The couple worked in tandem, their synergy palpable. Melanie's phone buzzed with messages of concern from friends and colleagues who had already seen footage of her arrest circulating on social media. "You've gone viral," Jonathan said, glancing at her screen. Melanie sighed. "Great, just what I needed." Jonathan's lips pressed into a thin line. "Actually, this might work in our favor. Public pressure can be a powerful tool." As they strategized, Jonathan's phone rang. It was his colleague, Vanessa, a fierce attorney known for her relentless pursuit of justice. "I heard what happened," Vanessa said without preamble. "Do you need backup?" Jonathan's voice was firm. "Absolutely. Can you help me draft the formal complaint and prepare for media outreach?" "Consider it done," Vanessa said. "We'll make them wish they never laid a finger on Melanie." After the call, Jonathan turned to Melanie. "Vanessa's on board. We'll hit them with everything we've got." Melanie's eyes sparkled with determination. "Good, because I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every woman who's ever been wrongfully accused." The next morning, the story had exploded across local news outlets. Headlines blared. "Prominent businesswoman wrongfully arrested. A case of racial profiling. Civil rights attorney Jonathan James takes on police misconduct." The media frenzy only fueled Jonathan and Melanie's resolve. They held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse, with reporters swarming around them. Jonathan stood tall, his voice unwavering. "Yesterday, my wife, Melanie James, a respected entrepreneur and community leader, was unjustly arrested based on nothing more than a vague description. This is not just a personal matter, it's a civil rights issue. We demand accountability and systemic reform." Melanie stepped forward, her voice clear and powerful. "I'm here today not just for myself, but for every person who has been silenced and mistreated. This isn't just about clearing my name. It's about changing a broken system." The crowd erupted with questions, cameras flashing. Jonathan and Melanie handled each inquiry with poise, their message resonating beyond the courthouse steps. As the days passed, the pressure mounted on the police department. Detective Harris, who had initially brushed off Melanie's claims of innocence, was now under scrutiny. Internal Affairs launched an investigation, and the precinct faced mounting public backlash. But Jonathan wasn't content with just a public apology. He wanted lasting change. "We need to push for mandatory bias training and stronger oversight," he told Melanie one evening as they reviewed their next steps. Melanie nodded. "And I want to establish a fund to support women who've been wrongfully accused. Legal aid, mental health support, the works." Jonathan's eyes gleamed with pride. That's my girl. Their fight for justice had transformed into something much bigger than themselves. They were determined to be a beacon of hope for those who had been overlooked and mistreated. 1 week later, the police chief held a press conference, flanked by Jonathan and Melanie. We acknowledge the wrongful arrest of Mrs. Melanie James and extend our sincere apologies. The chief said, "We are committed to implementing reforms to prevent such incidents in the future." Jonathan's expression was stoic. He knew apologies were only the first step. Melanie took the microphone, her voice steady. "This is a victory, but the fight is far from over. We will continue to hold systems accountable and advocate for those who don't have a voice." As they walked away from the podium, hand in hand, Melanie felt a sense of triumph. The road ahead was long, but they were ready to face it together. Jonathan squeezed her hand. "You're incredible. You know that." Melanie smiled. "We're a team, and we just proved that together we can move mountains." The echoes of truth. The world had taken notice of Jonathan and Melanie's stand against injustice. Their fight was no longer confined to the precinct or even the city. It had become a national conversation about racial profiling, police accountability, and systemic reform. News outlets across the country covered their story, and social media was ablaze with support. But with that support came resistance. Not everyone was on their side. Anonymous messages flooded their inboxes, some offering encouragement, others filled with vitriol. "You think you're heroes." One message sneered, "You're just stirring up trouble where there isn't any." Melanie's heart tightened as she read the hateful words. She knew standing up for justice came with a price, but the weight of it was heavy. Jonathan said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Don't let them get to you." "I won't," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "They're just scared of change." Jonathan nodded. "Exactly. And that's why we can't back down." The next step in their fight was a community forum at a local civic center. The event had been organized to address concerns about police practices and to discuss meaningful reforms. Jonathan had been invited as a keynote speaker, and Melanie was asked to share her experience. The auditorium was packed with people, activists, community leaders, concerned citizens, and even a few off-duty police officers who wanted to be part of the solution. The air buzzed with anticipation. Jonathan stood at the podium, his presence commanding. "We're here tonight because justice isn't just an abstract concept. It's a promise that has to be fulfilled for everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background. And when that promise is broken, we have a duty to demand accountability." The crowd erupted in applause. Jonathan's voice softened. "But this isn't just my fight. It's our fight. And my wife, Melanie, is living proof of why this fight matters." He stepped aside, gesturing for Melanie to take the podium. Melanie's heart raced as she faced the crowd. Public speaking wasn't her forte, but this was too important to shy away from. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves. "A few weeks ago, I was just a woman shopping for a gift for my husband. I didn't expect to end up in handcuffs, accused of a crime I didn't commit. But here I am, because that experience opened my eyes to something much bigger than myself." She paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "What happened to me isn't unique. It's part of a pattern that's been allowed to continue for far too long. And that's why we're here tonight, to break that pattern." The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. "I'm not just fighting for my own justice," she continued. "I'm fighting for every person who's been silenced, dismissed, or dehumanized by a system that's supposed to protect us. And together, we can make sure no one else has to go through what I did." Thunderous applause filled the room as Melanie stepped back from the podium. Jonathan took her hand, pride evident in his eyes. After the forum, people crowded around them, eager to share their stories and express their support. One woman, a middle-aged teacher with tear-filled eyes, approached Melanie. "Thank you for speaking up," the woman said. "My son was falsely arrested last year, and no one believed us. Seeing you fight back gives me hope." Melanie squeezed the woman's hand. "We're in this together. Don't ever give up." As the crowd thinned, a familiar face emerged. Detective Harris. Melanie's eyes narrowed. "Detective Harris," she said coolly. "What brings you here?" Harris looked uncomfortable but determined. "I came to listen. And to apologize." Jonathan's brow furrowed. "An apology won't undo what happened." "I know," Harris admitted, "but I want to do better. I've seen firsthand how the system fails people, and I'm tired of being part of the problem. If you're serious about reform, I want in." Melanie exchanged a glance with Jonathan. The sincerity in Harris's voice was unmistakable. "We'll hold you to that," Melanie said. Harris nodded. "I wouldn't expect anything less." In the days that followed, Jonathan and Melanie's fight continued to gain momentum. The fund Melanie had envisioned to support wrongfully accused women was launched, with donations pouring in from across the country. Vanessa, ever the powerhouse attorney, helped draft a comprehensive proposal for police reform, which they presented to city officials. The proposal included mandatory bias training, independent oversight, and community engagement initiatives. But the road was far from smooth. Critics accused them of being anti-police, and political obstacles threatened to derail their efforts. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Jonathan reminded Melanie one evening as they reviewed their progress. "But nothing worth fighting forever is." Melanie nodded. "We just have to keep pushing." One afternoon, Melanie received an unexpected call from Erica, the boutique clerk who had witnessed her arrest. "Melanie, you won't believe this," Erica said breathlessly. "The woman who actually committed the robbery. They caught her. And guess what? She confessed." Melanie's breath caught. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Erica confirmed. "They found her trying to rob another store, and she admitted to everything, including the robbery you were accused of." Relief washed over Melanie, but it was tinged with bitterness. "It shouldn't have taken this long." "I know," Erica agreed, "but at least the truth is out now." Melanie thanked Erica and hung up, her mind racing. The truth was finally on their side, but it didn't erase the damage done. Still, it was a victory, a testament to their resilience and determination. That evening, Melanie and Jonathan sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. "We did it," Melanie said softly. Jonathan smiled. "We're not done yet, but we've come a long way." Melanie leaned against him, a sense of peace settling over her. They had faced injustice head-on and emerged stronger. And though the fight was far from over, they knew they would face it together, side by side. Because justice, once ignited, was a flame that refused to be extinguished. Trials of redemption. The confession from the real thief had cleared Melanie's name, but the battle was far from over. The scars of her unjust arrest lingered, not just for her, but for the countless others whose voices had yet to be heard. News of the confession spread quickly, making headlines across the city. "Entrepreneur vindicated," "Police blunder exposed," blared one outlet. But for Melanie and Jonathan, this wasn't just about vindication. It was about creating lasting change. One bright morning, as they sat in their living room reviewing legal briefs and community proposals, Jonathan's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Vanessa. "You're not going to believe this," Vanessa said, her tone sharp with urgency. "The city council has scheduled a special hearing on police reform. They want you both to testify." Melanie's brows shot up. "So soon?" "They're feeling the pressure," Vanessa explained. "The public outcry after your arrest and the confession forced their hand. This is our chance to push for real change." Jonathan nodded grimly. "We'll be there." The day of the hearing dawned clear and bright, but the weight of the moment pressed heavily on Melanie's shoulders. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and protesters holding signs that read "Justice for All" and "End Racial Profiling Now." Jonathan squeezed her hand as they made their way inside. "You ready?" Melanie took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The hearing room was packed. the air thick with tension. City officials sat at a long table at the front, their expressions ranging from skeptical to sympathetic. Melanie and Jonathan took their seats at the witness table, facing the panel. Jonathan spoke first, his voice steady and commanding. "We're here today because my wife, Melanie, was wrongfully arrested based solely on her appearance. But this isn't just about one incident. It's about a system that allows such injustices to happen repeatedly." He outlined their demands for reform: independent oversight, mandatory bias training, and increased community engagement. Then was Melanie's turn. She took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. "When I was handcuffed in that boutique, I felt powerless," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I knew I was innocent, but that didn't matter to the officers who saw me as a suspect simply because of the color of my skin." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. "I'm here today not just for myself, but for every woman, every person, who has been treated as less than human by a system that's supposed to protect us. We need change, real change, and we need it now." The panel members whispered among themselves, clearly affected by her testimony. After a series of questions and statements from other witnesses, the hearing concluded. As Melanie and Jonathan exited the courthouse, they were met with cheers from supporters. "You did amazing," Jonathan said, wrapping an arm around her. Melanie smiled, though her heart still ached for those who hadn't found justice. "We're not done yet." Later that evening, back at home, Melanie received a surprising call from Detective Harris. "I wanted to thank you," Harris said, his voice sincere. "Your courage made me rethink everything. I'm leaving the force to join a community advocacy group. I want to be part of the solution." Melanie was stunned but pleased. "That's a big step. I'm glad you're doing it." "People like you and Jonathan inspired me," Harris admitted. "Keep fighting the good fight." After the call ended, Melanie shared the news with Jonathan. "That's huge," Jonathan said, impressed. "Maybe change really is possible." Melanie's eyes gleamed with determination. One step at a time. As the days turned into weeks, progress was slow but steady. The city council passed several reform measures, thanks in large part to the public pressure ignited by Melanie's case. The fund Melanie had established grew exponentially, providing legal aid and mental health support to dozens of wrongfully accused women. Testimonials poured in from those who had been helped, their gratitude fueling Melanie's resolve. One afternoon, as she reviewed the latest success stories, Erica from the boutique walked into her office. "Hey, stranger," Erica said with a grin. "Got a minute?" Melanie beamed. "Always. What's up?" "I've been thinking," Erica said, her tone serious. "I want to do more. Maybe join your fund as a community liaison. I've seen firsthand how messed up things can get, and I want to help fix it." Melanie's heart swelled with gratitude. "I'd love that. Welcome to the team." That evening, Melanie and Jonathan sat on their porch, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "We've come a long way," Jonathan said, his voice thoughtful. "We have," Melanie agreed. "But there's still so much to do." Jonathan took her hand. "We'll do it together, like always." Melanie smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. Their journey had been fraught with challenges, but they had emerged stronger, united by their love and their commitment to justice. As the stars sparkled overhead, Melanie knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. And together, they would continue to shine a light on injustice until the world was a better, fairer place for everyone. A legacy of change. Months had passed since Melanie's wrongful arrest and the whirlwind of events that followed. The city was still buzzing with the reforms sparked by their fight. But for Melanie and Jonathan, the journey was far from over. They had become symbols of resilience and change, their voices a beacon of hope for many. Their dining room had transformed into a makeshift war room. Papers were spread across the table, legal briefs, community proposals, and correspondence with activists and city officials. Melanie sat at the head of the table, her laptop open, as she reviewed the latest report from the fund they had established. "This is incredible," she said, scrolling through the document. "We've helped over 100 women this quarter alone." Jonathan, sitting across from her, smiled proudly. "And it's just the beginning. Your vision is changing lives, Melanie." She looked up, determination gleaming in her eyes. "Our vision, Jonathan. I couldn't have done this without you." Jonathan reached across the table, taking her hand. "We're a team. Always." Later that week, they hosted a community event to celebrate the progress made and to continue raising awareness about the ongoing fight for justice. The venue was packed with supporters, activists, and community leaders. Melanie stood at the podium, her heart swelling as she looked out at the diverse crowd. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Today we celebrate progress, but we also acknowledge that there's still work to be done. This fight isn't just about me or my experience. It's about creating a system that treats everyone with dignity and respect." The crowd erupted into applause. "We've seen what happens when people come together," she continued. "Change isn't just possible, it's inevitable when we refuse to stay silent." As she stepped back, Jonathan took the microphone. "I want to echo Melanie's words," he said, "and I also want to recognize the incredible woman standing next to me. Her strength, courage, and unwavering commitment have inspired all of us. She's proof that one person can spark a movement." The crowd rose to their feet, cheering and clapping. Melanie's heart swelled with gratitude. After the event, they mingled with attendees. A young woman approached Melanie, her eyes shining with admiration. "Mrs. James, I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said. "Because of your fund, I was able to fight a wrongful eviction case and keep my kids in our home." Tears pricked Melanie's eyes. "That's why we do this. I'm so proud of you for fighting back." As the woman walked away, Jonathan wrapped an arm around Melanie. "You're making a difference, one life at a time." Melanie leaned into him. "So are you." Their impact didn't go unnoticed. Media outlets continued to follow their story, and invitations poured in for speaking engagements and interviews. But one invitation stood out, a request to speak at a National Justice Summit in Washington, D.C. "This is huge," Jonathan said as they read the email together. Melanie's brow furrowed. "It is. But do you think we're ready for that level of exposure?" Jonathan's expression was firm. "We've been ready, Melanie. This is our chance to take our message to the national stage." She nodded, determination settling over her. "Then let's do it." The summit was held in a grand hall filled with policymakers, activists, and thought leaders from across the country. The atmosphere was electric with the possibility of change. Melanie and Jonathan were introduced as keynote speakers, their story already well known to many in the audience. Jonathan spoke first, his voice commanding as he laid out the systemic issues they had fought against and the reforms they had achieved. Then it was Melanie's turn. She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the attentive crowd. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she began. "But sometimes life pushes you onto a path you never expected. My arrest was a turning point, not just for me, but for my community and my city." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We didn't back down because we knew this fight was bigger than us. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Never underestimate the power of your voice. Change starts with courage, and courage starts with one decision: to stand up and speak out." The hall erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the vast space. After the summit, as they walked hand in hand through the streets of D.C., Melanie felt a profound sense of fulfillment. "We did it," she said softly. Jonathan smiled. "And we're just getting started." Melanie's gaze turned to the horizon. "There's still so much work to do, but I'm ready." Jonathan squeezed her hand. "So am I." As they walked into the future together, their legacy of justice and hope continued to grow. a testament to the power of love, courage, and the unyielding belief that change was always possible. Tears pricked Melanie's eyes. "That's why we do this. I'm so proud of you for fighting back." As the woman walked away, Jonathan wrapped an arm around Melanie. "You're making a difference, one life at a time." Melanie leaned into him. "So are you." Their impact didn't go unnoticed. Media outlets continued to follow their story, and invitations poured in for speaking engagements and interviews. But one invitation stood out: a request to speak at a National Justice Summit in Washington, D.C. "This is huge," Jonathan said as they read the email together. Melanie's brow furrowed. "It is. But do you think we're ready for that level of exposure?" Jonathan's expression was firm. "We've been ready, Melanie. This is our chance to take our message to the national stage." She nodded, determination settling over her. "Then let's do it." The summit was held in a grand hall filled with policymakers, activists, and thought leaders from across the country. The atmosphere was electric with the possibility of change. Melanie and Jonathan were introduced as keynote speakers, their story already well known to many in the audience. Jonathan spoke first, his voice commanding as he laid out the systemic issues they had fought against and the reforms they had achieved. Then it was Melanie's turn. She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the attentive crowd. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she began. "But sometimes life pushes you onto a path you never expected. My arrest was a turning point, not just for me, but for my community and my city." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We didn't back down because we knew this fight was bigger than us. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Never underestimate the power of your voice. Change starts with courage, and courage starts with one decision: to stand up and speak out." The hall erupted into applause, the sound echoing through the vast space. After the summit, as they walked hand in hand through the streets of D.C., Melanie felt a profound sense of fulfillment. "We did it," she said softly. Jonathan smiled. "And we're just getting started." Melanie's gaze turned to the horizon. "There's still so much work to do, but I'm ready." Jonathan squeezed her hand. "So am I." As they walked into the future together, their legacy of justice and hope continued to grow, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the unyielding belief that change was always possible.